when the governor of California, Jim Gray, I believe, was being recalled, and everybody came out of the woodworks to run for governor of California. There's like porn stars.
Yeah, right. Like 50
Ariana
different candidates.
Huffington ran, and Arnold Schwarzenegger ran and won. I'm seeing shades of that in this upcoming election. I think it's going to turn into a sideshow.
I hope so.
To which I say Chris Young 2014.
Chris Young 2014. We do hope to have Chris on the show at some point. We're not sure when. But at some point, we will have on this show. We will demand.
Are you going to run the show on a delay that day?
Yeah. We will demand the presence. If they are seeking the endorsement of the coalition, all right, we will demand their presence here in studio. But I don't know what your reaction to the current slate of candidates is, but we've got a state in crisis.
Isn't Slim Pickens running?
It's, here's what I'm most offended by. Politicians who are telling us they're going to go out and create jobs. Can I give me 20 seconds here for a rant? To all the politicians listening, or to the hacks who work for the politicians who are listening, newsflash, you cannot create jobs. Entrepreneurs, business people create jobs. Your function in government is simply to get out of the way. There is nothing, Mr. Fung, you can do to actually go out and create jobs. It is not government's role. I find it ironic that a proposed conservative Republican would say that he can go out and just, we're going to get 10,000 more jobs. We're going to get 50,000. We're going to get 1 million jobs. I mean, it's shades of, we're going to have better lunches in the cafeteria and there's going to be no more tests. Yeah. It's astonishing the arrogance of these people to think that they are a solution.
That the phrase itself kind of comes from the soundbite nature of politics today. You can't say, listen, we're going to work with businesses, existing and new businesses, and come up with some type of system that's going to make Rhode Island attractive to them. And then they're going to create those said 20,000 jobs. It's too long of a thought to fit in that 15-second soundbite that all the news outlets want.
I'm going to be optimistic for a second. We've got what? Almost how many years left over to run up to the campaign? Could we take this opportunity, at least one of these candidates, I don't know, to attempt to educate the electorate on the nature of government and job creation? I just, for the hell of it, I don't know, maybe wing it and actually try and explain to people what their role in job creation is. Because, frankly, it's this whole notion where we, break glass, add water, and instantly jobs will produce, and, marching down Westminster Street, it's pathetic. It's insulting. Even if the electorate is uninformed, it's insulting to us to think that these folks, who, by the way, have in many cases helped create the conditions that exist today, are going to have a deathbed conversion to some type of fiduciary or fiscal responsibility and create an environment and take it from the most vicious anti-business environment in the nation and all of a sudden open their arms and we'll all sing Happy Day, and hold hands and march down Westminster Street.
Yeah, and I think that what you said earlier about how our government's kind of filled with these mid-level management positions. I guess too many chiefs, not enough Indians, right? That's really what it comes down to.
More hate mail.
Too many cooks, not enough sous chefs. I don't know. What do you want to take it back to the restaurant? But we have
too many radio commentators and not enough radio hosts. Okay,
or in this case, not enough radio listeners, right? So, I think that most folks, if you look at what the state spends, I don't think that it's an unreasonable amount if you look at it as the whole. I think the problem is, where do we spend that money? How do we spend that money? What programs does that money get spent on? Because that's really what you spend that money on is really what shows people what the priorities are for any particular government or administration. Like if you want to take more money into creating tax breaks for small businesses, I think that's a fantastic idea. I'm not a big fan of tax incentives to begin with because I don't think we should kind of fight and squabble and play like who can give away the most to get the most. I mean, it's a wash in most cases, but we have to find a way to fix largely, and I think what's really broken in the state is we have a horrible self-esteem problem, and it is writ large in a city like Woonsocket. It's one thing if the states around us look at Rhode Island and go, man, those guys are a bunch of yahoos. But it's another thing if the people themselves, if we ourselves as Rhode Islanders are going, man, we are a bunch of yahoos.
Well, I mean, but to play devil's advocate, isn't, one of the most cliched responses is, of course, problem recognition is the first step towards problem resolution. Right. I mean, our governor would have us believe that everything is beautiful in its own way, yet at the same time, we have to take stock of ourselves as a state and realize that this is an economic black hole.
But you can't get stuck on that step.
True.
You gotta keep moving the ball forward, and you have to. Recognizing the problem and then walking away from it hasn't done anything. That's simply the first step. And you see this in this. You're going to see it in this governor race. People are going to say things like, "We're going to create 20,000 jobs." Okay, because we all know unemployment is a horrible problem in this state. We know this. We live inside of this problem every single day. Mm-hmm. But they never get to the how. What are the mechanisms? What are the legislative priorities? What are the regulatory or moving beyond regulation? What are those types of priorities for any particular candidate? They say things, but then it's problem recognition over and over and over again. Well, we need to, we should, I will, but they never get to the mechanism.
But why do voters eat that up? I mean, they gobble those generalities up, unfortunately.
Because we're short-term attention span theta here. To his credit, one of Mr. Block's proposals this past week has been the notion that he will veto, just out of sheer spite, seemingly, any type of social legislation, all right, that gets in the way of a hardcore discussion of economics in the first portion of his term. Just anything that doesn't have to do with assessing and actually fixing our economic problems just has to be put on the side at this point. And as someone, we're a proponent of marriage equality here. We're a proponent of a number of social initiatives that came through. At the same time, we recognize here on the show that our priorities in this state are horribly misplaced because nothing will lift up all of these folks better than obviously having a functional, at this point, a borderline functional economy in the state.
And what really is saddening about the situation that's been going on for years at the General Assembly is how much of that good legislation dies in committee. How much horse trading is done. I mean, same-sex marriage, great. I'm glad we got it done. How many good pieces of legislation got traded away? Hey, I'll tell you what, we get your vote on this, we'll keep this thing in committee. We won't let this go forward. We'll let this one wither on the vine.
The sum and total effort of this past legislative session in terms of economic development was a discussion of how to analyze the economy here in the state of Rhode Island. And anyone with a grade school education, anyone who can fog up a mirror, understands the problems. I mean, we no longer need charrettes, symposiums, meetings, conclaves. We just don't need that anymore. The problems are starkly apparent. The solutions are actually relatively straightforward. It's a question of having the political will to execute those, understanding that in the short term, there's going to be bruised feelings and there's going to be people who will be hurt in that initial period. The response being, of course, that in the longer, even the medium term, you'll show an immediate improvement in people's lives here in this state.
Yeah, and I think that the most people that will get hurt are the people that, when you make that unpopular decision, you lose a seat. You lose your seat. If you want to keep that seat, you go along to get along. That's how it's done.
Well, and that's why we have legislative grants on the state level, where you've got you've got a legislative budget process that's constitutional in nature, and then you've got these legislative grants which are just passed out, which completely subvert the whole process and any absence of internal control. To find out that same thing was happening here in Providence under the auspice of the city council is stunning. That this kind of thing can go on for years under the table, under the radar. That preferred organizations would be the beneficiary of tax dollars. No follow-up, no execution, no planning, just sort of pell-mell. Let's stroke a check to people.
Remember a few years back with the check-off contributions that were going on for years, or checking off, I want this to go to the donor fund, or I want it to go to Special Olympics, and turned out you were checking off crap because it was just all dropping into the general fund, and there was no oversight there.
Yeah, and that's a big problem at the state level, is that lack of restricted receipt accounts.
Right.
You should, as taxpayers, we should all be thoroughly ticked off by the fact that there is absolutely no delineation to where your tax dollars go. You pay locally, you pay your property taxes, it goes into your city's general fund. They don't say 20% of your property tax is going to go for this budget. It's going to go to this department. 10% is going to go here. 5% is going to go there. I think that would be, to me, as a citizen, that would be a really great show of faith. If that's all that it was from our local and state governments, to say, look, we're going to start moving back to these restricted receipt accounts. We're going to start using those tax dollars for what they're supposed to be used for. And you will know as a citizen that when you pay your taxes, this is where it's going. This is how it gets divvied up. This is how we use your money.
What if we took one of those clear booths you see at the casino with all the money in it and the vacuum system, and we had the department heads go into that booth, and any money that they could get, then that would be their budget.
You have 60 seconds starting now.
Then that would be their budget for the next fiscal year.
And later on, we can each give them a shopping cart, and they can go through. They've got 5 minutes to grab the steaks.
Supermarket sweeps.
Isn't that pretty much what we're doing right now?
It might be.
I mean, we've had lawsuits that we've been the beneficiary of, and to the tune of probably in the aggregate $1 billion.
Wasn't there a new one this week?
They're usually, I think, when we reach,
it was from Google this week, I believe.
Yeah, Google. The Google money went to. A lot of it went to the city of North Providence,
right? Yep.
Okay.
Who now is actually, I think, negotiating on an aircraft carrier.
Put it over in Waterman Lake.
They're going to name it the Mancini.
It's going to be stocked with all the rubbers you can steal. There'll only be a handful of people that get that joke, but they're going to think it's
Chip
hilarious.
Young, if you're listening, I know you're laughing at that.
And there will be, since Waterman Lake is clearly offshore and off of the United States boundaries, there clearly will be gambling allowed. Okay,
Sweet.
Just far enough offshore, right?
But billions of dollars, whether it be no, that's right. We lost the lead paint one. Thanks, Sherbert. The lottery winner, the tobacco lawsuit, this law. We're a state that lurches from crisis to crisis in the hopes that you had a sitting governor this year hoping for more lottery winners to keep the government afloat.
And never capitalizing on a crisis. Never once using a crisis as a teaching opportunity, right? As a teachable moment.
Right, because you'd have to learn. And, in our next segment, we're going to talk a lot about, we're talking about tax breaks. We're going to start to focus in, like the proverbial laser, on just the sheer capricious, arbitrary nature of some of these tax breaks, aren't we?
Yeah, they're really, everybody knows what went on with CVS at the state level, where, the governor, I think rightly so, wanted to adjust the Jobs Development Act and kind of spread the love of tax incentive dollars a little bit. And CVS basically said, well, if you do that, we're going to take our ball and go home.
Right. And the ultimate question, of course, is can they, will they, and what real impact they would have? Because, we're going to discuss in what other state could a company like CVS essentially control the environment. Remember, they've pleaded NOLO a couple of times.
Oh, sure.
We've got shopping bag Jerry Martineau, former House Salon, who did he do some hard time per se? This was the guy who
I think he went to minimum security for that. He did do time, but I wouldn't call it hard time.
Okay,
I don't think polo and tennis.
This is the guy who got the shopping bag contract for CVS in exchange for, allegedly, in exchange for a vote on Health and Human Services. This kind of crap goes on all the time. So are we, in fact, a fiefdom run by CVS? I mean, is it, is that what's happening? I mean, and at what point, even in our crippled state economically, are we handed a set of dictates to by a private corporation?
And we are halfway through the show, which means we are going to take a quick break. I think that on the other side of the break, I want to get to Mr. Swan's clip, too, which I think sums up he specifically talks about Virginia and Libertarian Party candidates. However, I think it sums it up for pretty much any third party or unaffiliated, quote-unquote, independent candidate. So we'll get to that right after the break. CoalitionRadio.us on Facebook, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, and of course on Twitter, which you should all use because I'm now a Twitter shareholder, at Coalition_Radio.